before I go.
I had a question about the new bodies, because it says in the Bible we're going to get new bodies.
It does indeed. It does indeed. The reason why I didn't stress that point immediately when I was talking to the brothers is because I wanted them to understand that in the Christian worldview, the physical body is transformed into the spiritual body, but it's still this physical body that is transformed.
So you think maybe we're gonna have like you can look at it, the old you maybe?
I don't know. I'm not going to attempt to define it. All I know is that there is a continuation between this matter that is you and that which will live into eternity.
So would you say it's more of a perfection of what?
I'm not going to try and define it. All I'm going to say is that there is a continuity between your physical body and what goes on. Do you want to go for a drink?
I've got to leave now.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's a no then.
No.
There's a continuity between your physical body and what lives on in eternity.
If you're married here on earth, are you married in heaven?
No, of course not. Jesus said that they're not given or taken in marriage in heaven.
He said that?
Yes, he said that.
Where?
Okay. Are you a Mormon by any chance?
No.
Where do you get that question from, out of interest?
That's a good question.
It is a good question, and I will endeavour to answer
I have no answer, that's why I asked.
Could you... Bear with us.
Are people having sex in heaven?
No.
No.
But isn't this God's gift? Wait, isn't this something God created?
It's God's gift for this world, not for the next. You get a better gift in the next world.
Yeah.
And that is that you get to be in the presence of God. And when you're in the presence of God, you won't want to have sex because it'll be great. And sex will seem boring. Sex will seem boring by comparison. Yeah, and this is one of the criticisms that I have of Islamic heaven. Is Islamic heaven is essentially a brothel on earth. It's essentially a brothel on earth. Allah enslaves these creatures that he creates to be the sex slaves of Muslims. And the Muslim man gets to have sex constantly. If that's the best heaven that they've got, I am just not interested. Just not interested. Right, so we're looking for where Christ said that they will not be given in marriage, but they will be like unto the angels at the resurrection. Do you? Matthew 22. Right? Matthew 22 or 13?
22:13.
22:13. Thank you so much, guys. So let me show you, bro. In Matthew 22, verse 13, it says... 30. Thank you, guys. In verse 30, it says, "But Jesus answered and said to them, You are mistaken, not understanding the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven. But regarding the resurrection of the dead, you have not read what was spoken to you by God. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living." So that comes back to an earlier point that I was saying with these two Seeker guys, which we never really got onto, which is that we believe that the soul is in heaven with God until the resurrection. And at the resurrection, the soul will be reunited to the body and reanimated in a transformed body. And we know this because Jesus said to the thief who was on his right or his left, he said, "You this day will be with me in paradise." And the resurrection hasn't happened yet, but Jesus is no liar. And so that thief was in some way with Jesus in paradise. So the souls of the saints are in heaven now with God.
So when we are in heaven, is it like people who are married, they're not married anymore? You can just fly where you want. It's like
I wouldn't try to find such worldly metaphors. What I would say, and I would simply say this, that being in the presence of God is like the best celebration that you could possibly attend. So however you imagine the best possible celebration, it will be better than what you imagine, but it will have the feeling of a celebration. So the biblical language to describe it was the idea of a wedding feast, because that was one of the high points of Jewish culture in terms of celebration. But it's going to be better than that. Yeah? And that's what awaits the saints in heaven, is a brilliant celebration. But don't look for sort of animalistic metaphors or think that we need to have animalistic attitudes.
But in the Bible it says that
There's going to be new heaven and new earth.
you should not feed the body because you will do sin, the Bible says.
No, it says that you shouldn't feed the flesh.
The flesh.
But what it's talking about when it talks about flesh there...
God did also create the flesh, right?
No, you're misunderstanding Paul's use of the flesh. When Paul uses the flesh in that phrase, that verse that you're talking about, what he's talking about, and it's in Galatians and Ephesians, when he uses that kind of language, he's saying that there's natural inclinations that lead us away from God. Your pride, your envy, your greed, your lust, your vengeful attitudes. This is what he's talking about by flesh, because these things instinctively you have from being a child. So they're just part of what you are to be a human. And he's saying, don't feed that avarice, don't feed that wrath, don't feed that greed, don't feed that lust. That's what he's talking about. Because
Is lust a sin?
yes.
What is lust? To want something?
Lust is to want something out of all proportion to its objective good.
What does that mean?
So for instance, right, sex is a wonderful gift from God inside marriage.
Why?
Because marriage is there for the creation of children, the raising of children, and education of children, and it's also the bedrock of society. It's the very basic building block of society. If you have lots of strong families, you end up with a strong society. The problem with lust is it distorts that. You end up having sex with lots of different people, and it ends up eroding the family, which is exactly what we saw in the 1960s. We saw the West experiment with this idea of a sexual revolution, and now enough time has passed for us to recognize that sexual revolution has failed. It's a failed revolution. It's brought more harm than good.
I think it does bad for people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as a Christian, I reject it. I reject the 1960s revolution, I reject the sexual revolution, and I encourage you to reject it. But if you're going to reject it, you have to reject its root. And its root is the embracement of lust as something that is good. And it's not good. There is something better that Christianity offers: chastity. Chastity doesn't mean not having sex. Even married couples have chastity. Chastity means expressing sex as a form of love in a faithful, committed relationship between a man and a woman. Chastity means for me as a single man that I should avoid having sex outside of marriage. That's what...
Because it will hurt you eventually.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Christianity is offering a better way of life than the Western liberalism. Are you a Christian yourself?
Yes.
Right. So what you need as a Christian is to have firmness and conviction in your heart that our belief is the way, our belief is the truth, our belief is the life. And you have to have conviction in your heart so that you can offer an identity, an alternative identity to the liberal progressive and their this world gods, their Epicurean humanism. That's what you need, because all your questions are sincere, brother, but I'm not sure I'm detecting a firm conviction, a firmness in your belief. It's almost like well, is it true? It really is true. And you really must believe that it's true. And you really must cultivate firmness in your heart. Because lots of churches, they're failing the Christian community because they don't teach Christians to have firmness in their belief, to have firmness in their practice of the belief. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
good,
bro.
Very good preaching. I came from Norway.
Peace be with you, brother.
You were one of the reasons why I came.
Oh, thank you so much.
Because,
I'm really honored.
Yeah. I've seen you preaching and it's fantastic to see you preach.
Well, thank you so much.
Are you here every day?
No, this park only happens on a Sunday. It only happens on a Sunday.
Are these your people or friends or
Well,
something?
some of them are friends, some of them are like you, they just come and listen because they saw me on a video, and some of them are like I guess supporters.
Would you like to come to Norway and preach?
If I'm invited, I'll come.
I would love to maybe invite you. Can I get your?
Yeah, I'll give you my email address.
I'm one of your subscribers. Subscribers on the
Okay.
internet.
I'll give you. Let me give you my email address. Right.
Because I think you're very smart. You know a lot. One question for you.
Yeah.
Today I was talking with some Muslims, and he said, like in Hebrew, I think it was 5:7.
Yeah.
Jesus prayed,
Yes.
and he said,
Yes. Jesus prays.
yeah, prayed. Let this go away from me, or something like that.
That's in Luke, and it's in 22.
And then it
And
says
in the Garden of
God,
Gethsemane.
God heard him. He
Yeah.
said that was like it was his defense that Jesus was not killed.
Yeah, right. But that's not true, because what in the Garden of Gethsemane in Luke chapter 22, Jesus says, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from my hand, but not my will, but yours be done.
That's in Luke, but it doesn't
Right.
say that in Hebrew.
Okay, in Hebrew.
No, in yes, in.
No, the Gospels were written in Greek. The Muslim is lying to you. Sorry, one second. The Muslim who said that is lying to you. The Gospels are not written in Hebrew. They're written in Greek. The Greek says what I'm saying to you in English. Right? There's no Hebrew involved here.
No, but in Paul's letter to the Hebrew church.
Okay, let's look at it.
Capital 5,
okay.
verse 7.
Let's look at it.
Can you look it up?
Right,
please? I
so,
don't have more battery.
So firstly,
But it's rubbish, because Paul, he was transformed by meeting Jesus, the resurrected one.
I know, exactly. So that's your first argument against that. But let's just go through the text, because what this shows. Let's just pull it up, right? So in Hebrews chapter 5,
Verse 7.
verse 7. Okay. Do 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 do. Okay, Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7. Okay, it says this: in the days of his flesh he offered up both prayers and supplications with loud crying and tears to the one able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his piety. Although he was a son, he learned obedience he learned obedience from the things which he suffered, and having been made perfect, he became to all those who obey him the source of eternal salvation, being designated by God as a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. That's what the passage says. He forgot to include the other bit, that Christ genuinely suffered. Now, the first thing that demonstrates is that Paul knew the gospel story about Jesus, because the gospel story about Jesus says that Christ prayed to the Father, and it says that God heard him. And that is exactly what Paul is saying. So Paul knows the gospel story about Jesus. So it's not that Paul was teaching something different to Jesus. He knew about Jesus and taught the same thing. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there's nothing in this verse that says Jesus Christ didn't die on the cross.
Now they think because he was heard,
Yes.
he was
The thing about the Dai in this corner, right, is they're constantly going around the corner looking for Christians that don't know their Bible.
And I don't even know that Paul
Yeah, he was ambushed earlier.
even
Right,
Paul,
brother, listen. You asked a question, let me answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Right? Because it might not just be you that benefits, there'll be other people that benefit. So the thing that every Christian who comes to this park needs to recognize is that the Dai operating in this park are liars. They literally take verses out of their context and ignore the context. And the fact of the matter is, in Hebrews, it talks about the fact that Christ suffering. Let's see. Can we just pull up? Can someone just Google where it talks about Christ suffering? Right. So here, look, in Hebrews chapter 10, I found it, guys. Hebrews chapter 10. Right. It says, listen. This is speaking about Jesus. He having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time. So the letter of Hebrews in chapter 10 says that Christ offered a one-time sacrifice.
And even Paul met the resurrected one.
Yes, bro. We're talking about the Hebrew passage that you've invited me to talk about. So the fact of the matter is, Hebrews says that Christ offered a sacrifice. What's a sacrifice? A sacrifice is something that dies. So when it talks about Christ offering up prayers to be saved, it's talking about the fact that Christ is raised from the dead. And in the Gospels, when Christ prays to the Father and says, remove this cup from my hand, not my will but yours be done, the prayer that Christ is offering at that moment in time is that he should do the will of the Father. Not that he should do something other than what the Father wants. That's actually what Christ prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew this, by the way.
So why did you...
Huh?
So that, fair enough. You've asked a question, I've given an answer.
Very
right?
good.
Okay. Okay, so there we go. Yes, I'll just finish on this. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 12. He, having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of God, waiting from that time onward until his enemies be made his footstool for his feet. For by one offering he has perfected for all time those who are sanctified, and the Holy Spirit also testifies to us after saying,
Amen.
Amen.